Okay, so we should be live, and if we're not, then hopefully somebody will tell me. And actually, one thing I don't know is about the comment section. I believe this is the comment section. Okay, sorry, little bit of technicalities before I introduce this. So we are the historical debuts. I don't know that we're all of us, but we are 5 of the coolest of us. And we're here to talk about our books that all came out this year, or one of us is coming out. 2 of us are coming out later this year. So
Hey.
I am Elder Moke, and my book came out in June, just a couple of weeks ago, and it is Hood, about the daughter of Robin Hood. And we also have with us Samantha Cohoe, who wrote A Golden Fury. Show off that beautiful cover.
Oh,
and then it comes with a bookmark. All books come pre-marked.
Yeah.
And we also have June Hur, who wrote The Silence of Bones, which I just started and am very excited about. And then we've got Chloe Gong, who wrote These Violent Delights. Look at that cover. It's so beautiful. I can't wait for this one. Look, 2 for the price of 1. Yes. And then we also have Kristin Lambert, whose book also recently just came out, The Boy in the Red Dress. And I also just picked this one up, and I'm going to start it off. And I think three of you, so Chloe and Kristin, your books are both set in the 20s. And then Samantha, you and I, our next books are set in the 20s. So June, we're going to need you to write a book in the 20s.
Yeah. Get on our level, June.
That's right. So I'm going to start us off. I've introduced you and your book, but I would like you to introduce your book for us. But I want you to phrase it like a cheesy 90s movie trailer. So for me, for Hood, it would be something along the lines of, and bonus points if you do the trailer guy voice. So it'll be like, in a world where Prince John becomes king.
I totally begins with In a World.
I've got In a Land.
Yeah, see? Their daughter Isabel must face a vengeful king and a decades-old blood feud to save her family from destruction. One girl, one shot, a legend in the making. Hood. That would be my trailer.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so I want to hear, Samantha, I want to hear yours.
Okay. In a land torn apart by revolution, the French Revolution specifically, one girl is on a mission to create the Philosopher's Stone, but the cost may be her own mind.
Yes. I love it. Okay, June, hit us.
Oh my gosh.
Do the voice.
Right.
You gotta do the voice.
Bright-eyed servant girl So lives in ancient Korea and must help the tortured investigator Inspector Han in solving the mystery behind the death of a mysterious noblewoman.
Yes. I just got to the death of the noblewoman, and now I need to know. I need to know what happens.
That's
okay.
great.
Chloe.
So I actually had to look up what 90s movie trailers sound like.
Oh, that's right. A sweet babe in the woods.
We're so young. Is that why?
Okay. I didn't pre-prepare though, so I'll make this up on the spot. In 1926, Shanghai, a blood feud tearing up the city. Yes. A monster awakens, and 2 heirs must kill it before everyone dies in the city. Coming November.
Yeah.
Great. Wait, you have to say the name of the title. There you go. There you go. Bring it back around. Okay, Kristin, give it to us. Can we get a little shimmy? Because I feel like your book needs a shimmy. Yes.
That's a terrible shimmy. Okay. In a world where bootleggers and fugitives live on every corner, nights in this steamy New Orleans speakeasy are even hotter than the day. But when Millie's drag queen best friend is accused of murdering a glamorous socialite, she'll have the fight of her life to prove his innocence. Dirty cops, lying debutantes, and romantic entanglements stand in her way. Can she solve the crime before it's too late?
Give us
Sounds
a
good.
title.
Oh, The Boy in the Red Dress. It already came in 2020.
That was good. I'm going to need you to write my copy.
I got to credit my friend Katie Gardner. I was like, I have to do this, help. And she came up with the In a World part, and I was like, okay, I got this. Okay.
Yeah. If you just start with In a World, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
where it's And because all of these books sound so amazing, we are each giving away a copy of our book. So 5 winners will each get a chance to win 1 copy of our book. So you don't win 5 books, you win 1 book. And I'm posting that giveaway link here in the chat right now. So it is open right now. It'll be open throughout this chat. If you go and fill out this Google form, you'll be entered to win 1 copy of one of our books. It'll be a surprise which one you get, but they're all fantastic. So you're welcome.
Yeah.
So also, moving on, I want to know, how are all of you either like your MC, your main character, or what was it that drew you to tell this main character story? So Kristin, because I feel like you won the movie trailer round, I would like to hear about your main character and what drew you to write them.
I didn't know we were doing winners and losers.
I didn't either, but
really
I'm glad I won.
I mean, all right. Why not in this chat?
Okay, well, my main character is Millie, and she works at her aunt's speakeasy, and when her best friend gets accused of murder, she has to solve it. So she is really smart ass and tells a lot of lies and considers that a value. And I'm not really like her very much, but we are both.
Sorry, I think we have a little bit of an echo.
I think we do too. I'm hearing it too. I don't know why it's happening.
We weren't getting it before, but now it was happening. Okay, I'm not hearing it anymore, so try it.
Is it just me?
Yeah, maybe if everybody else wants to go on mute. If you just want to mute your microphone, because I'm not sure who it was. But Kristin, why don't you try to keep going?
Okay. Well, anyway, she's very impulsive, which I'm not because I'm an anxiety queen. So, but the way we're alike is that she's very loyal to her friends. And I mean, she's willing to solve a murder for one. But I get, like, if my friend tells me somebody hurt them, they're telling me this story about somebody that did them wrong, like my face literally starts going red like this. Get this rage wave and I'm ready to smash somebody. So that part is kind of similar.
If you're going to be like your main character, I think that's the best way to be. So Samantha, why don't you tell us about I'm going to say Thea because I don't know how to say her full name.
It's Thesebia, but that doesn't matter. So I definitely, by the way, are you still hearing an echo? Because
I am not. No.
Okay. So Thea's based on me, basically. She parts of me, I like mind my ambitious self for her and, some traumas and
obviously the fact that she's a genius who who's on her way to discovering the Philosopher's Stone.
Definitely her geniusness, yes. And she makes some pretty bad choices though, so that also felt very relatable. And actually I felt like the specific situation, weirdly enough, of sort of having been raised to do a very unusual job by her mother, that was relatable for me. Although, sadly, I'm not an alchemist.
Well, there's always tomorrow. So, Chloe, tell us about your main character and what inspired you to write them.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I am not alike to my main character at all, which I think surprises people, but I feel like ever since writing her and when I try give an image online, I've kind of started adapting her traits. So my main character, Juliet, is very brutal would be the word. She isn't evil, but she doesn't exactly care for the same sort of morals as say someone living in a very rule-bound society would care for, because 1920 Shanghai at the time was very there wasn't a government, it was gangster rule, you survive on the streets and that's how you can keep yourself going. So she's very unlike me in that sense, but I think in that I wrote a 1920s Shanghai story in the first place, it was really important to me to have like a Chinese main character and to give her all the heritage that I came from. So in that part, she's very like me, and all the stories that she knows and like all of her cultural values, and especially like she's not technically a member of the diaspora, but she was sent to New York to be educated. So she's very westernized. She's the one who like does all the like English French translations within her family, because that's what they send her off to be educated for. So I think other second generation like diaspora like today will feel a lot of what she goes through, because that was what I was drawing from like when I was writing her.
Yeah. And I think because June, you have tweeted pictures of when you traveled and went and saw some of the locations from your book. So did you also feel like that part of your character came into play as far as how you connected with your main character?
Yeah, it was really interesting writing the book, because when I began writing The Silence of Bones, I actually knew very little about Korea, and I had very little emotional connection to Korea's past. So I guess while writing about my heroine, it almost felt like I was learning more about myself. And so the things I discovered about myself, like how deeply rooted like family values, like filial piety is in Korean culture and just East Asian culture in general, I think that like because I discovered that was an actual Confucian value, I ended up integrating it really deeply into my heroine as well. And I think another thing that's similar is, so the heroine is an orphan and she's kind of living away from her older sister. And for me, when I was growing up, I didn't, in most of my teenage years and adult years, like I spent it without my parents because they live in Korea. And so for me, I wrestled a lot with the idea of, where is home? And that is a question that the heroine wrestles with a lot as well. And so I think those two aspects, I'm able to relate a lot to my heroine.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, because for me, I've had people ask me, like, what are your connections with the character? And I realized that every main character I ever write, they're always looking for their place and their purpose in the world. And that's really just because that's what I'm doing. That's just my ongoing journey.
It's unending.
Yeah. So then I think I end up exploring that through the characters that I write, just hoping that one day maybe one of them will give me the answer that I was looking for. So, because we all write historicals, but we all write young adult, how would your main character fare in a modern high school? Do you think they would do well? What do you think they would be into? So I'll who can I pick on now? Chloe, why don't you tell us about your brutal gang war? Would she be a queen bee?
Well in one night? She would, absolutely.
Okay.
Because everyone's afraid of her, right? And she knows it. So I feel like in a modern high school setting, that is exactly like what the people at the top know. Like they know how to boss people around, and Juliet would absolutely do that.
Kristin, what do you think? Because your character sounds more undercover.
Yeah, well, she has a high school, and there she's kind of an outcast and pretending like she doesn't care about it. So I think that she would probably continue with that. Okay. And also, she'd probably be doing that Veronica Mars thing, like solving mysteries and fighting injustice.
Yeah.
While also just being a smartass.
Yeah, like she'd be
I said it again. Sorry.
A teen. It's okay. It's okay. She'd be a teen private eye, which are very common, very prolific.
Yeah, I mean,
I've hired
everywhere.
many teen private investigators in my life.
Me too. God, every other week.
So, Samantha, do you think that your character would be in STEM, or would she be doing something different?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think she would. I actually didn't go to high school, so I feel like I'm kind of poorly equipped to answer this question. But based on my reading of young adult novels and my research into what high school is like, I would say Thea's probably in chess club because she's a nerd.
Okay.
Are there like STEM clubs? Because she would totally do that. And then
I feel like there must be.
I think so.
Surely, yeah. Okay, so she's in STEM club. She does science, whatever.
But would she be in like the weird fringy ones where they're like maybe trying to invent time travel?
Or she's like, they're like doing weird stuff with blood for like rich tech bros or
Yeah.
the current modern alchemy. No,
Yeah.
she probably wouldn't get into that. Anyway, she's also going to be in the debate club because she likes to fight.
Okay. That's a good, well-rounded.
Yeah.
That's representative of high school, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Pulled it
Yeah.
off. You pulled it off.
Did I convince you that I know what high school's like?
For sure. Other than the opening where you said you'd never been and you had no idea.
Yeah.
June, how do you feel about your main character? What would she be doing?
My main character she's one of the nice girls. Like she's kind-hearted, but she's also very nosy. So I think she'd be one of those friends where you go to spill all your heartaches to, and then she'll be like, who hurt you? And then she'll go investigating into seeing like who hurt her best friend. So I think she would not be one of the popular girls, but she'd have a lot of friends who know that she's a great listener. But on the flip side, I think she'd also feel very lonely because she's just always listening to people's problems. So that's the kind of girl she would be in high school.
She would take on everyone else's pain.
Yeah.
Maybe your character and Kristin's character could start a detective agency together because yours are both kind of like thrillers. They're like
do like the investigators. Have y'all seen that show? It's like for children, but I love it.
I have not watched it, but I've seen it on YouTube.
I'm obsessed with it. It's so cute.
Okay, so because we're here to talk about historicals, I want to know what part of your research process broke you emotionally? Because for me,
so deep.
We all got there. And I feel like, Chloe, I know your answer because you tweeted once about having to put a building in your story that wasn't going to be built for like 2 years, but you needed it for plot purposes.
Yeah.
So was that your moment, or was there a lower point for you where you're like, what have I done? Why did I?
It was, I think, there's like the petty side of writing historical, right? Where it's like, oh my God, all these details I have to make fit. And then there's like the really deep, dark part of historical, like where you're like, wow, I can't believe this is really history and I have to like put this in, right? I think they're both very like, they both happen. But yeah, it happens so much with the building. Like, I think I have, at the time of tweeting that, I only had one. But now in book 2, I have like 4 separate buildings that were built in like 1933, 1936. And I'm like, I need you guys. You can't leave me. I need you for the atmosphere. You're going in. There's nothing I can do about it. But yeah, it hurts me on a fundamental level to have to do it. But, anything for the atmosphere.
Well, I think it's one of those things where literally no one will know but you, but you'll constantly be like, who's going to call me out? Like, I'm going to be on a panel and then some like historical expert's going to, because like for me, as mine is set in the medieval times, and like medievalists are a big thing, and I'm terrified of them.
Yeah, you should be.
Way more than I do.
You had that point about the nuns being bald, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. So like, but I'm ready for that one because I researched that so nuns or sisters. So my story takes place in a priory, or my main character comes from a priory. And so part of sisters who would join the orders, they often had their heads shorn. They would shave off all their heads or all their hair. And part of that was, it came from men. It came from like the men who were in charge, the abbots that they would report to, because they didn't want the women to be like sexual in any way.
Too hot.
So like they'd make them wear the wimples and like the full robes, and like that
makes so much sense.
It does. And I read like whole like dossiers about why they did it, but it made no sense to have a bald main character. Like I was going to spend more time trying to explain it and sell it than to just like let her have hair. But I'm like ready on a panel. Like that point will come for me, and I'll be like, listen, I did my research and I made
this was a choice.
Yeah.
So Sam, do you have
for me,
a point?
It's like the logistics. It's the little stuff, like, so I had my copy editor pointed out that at one point I said Thea didn't have enough money for a night at like an inn, but then she does have enough money to take a carriage to London. And I was like, How could one find this? Like, can we make this vaguer somehow? Like, I really don't want to have to know how much money those two respective things are.
And how much she has on her person.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And like
That's
how much
inflation.
Yeah.
And like June, I think I remember you had a whole passage in copy edits about the moon, right?
Yeah. So that was so it's not, that one's more like a logical error where it's like, oh, I was like, it's not a full moon every day. Like it can't be a full moon. But then there were no lamps in the chosen period. So I'm like, so how are my characters going to see each other? I had to figure that one out.
Does anybody else really hate ships? Like ships are hard. No?
I
just brush over it.
My next book is set in the 20s. And it's 1925, and there's a whole, like a good third of the book that takes place on a ship. And I have spent no less than 2 hours researching portholes and their sizes and like their relations to each other and how, like, just for like one throwaway, like one throwaway, like
this is too much. And I do feel like ship people know about ships, like like horse people too. It's just
they do. Horse people, I will probably also. Because there are horses in Hood, but I don't know anything about horses. I've been horse like once in my adult life. It was terrifying. So that was just, my whole scene of her on a horse was just her being terrified. Because I was like, I feel like that would be the case. So June, was there something that you like broke you emotionally when you were trying to do research?
So this is kind of like a party pooper, but I think for me it's like the burden of representing a history accurately.
That's not a party pooper.
Oh,
one of us should have said it. Yeah.
You're all just irresponsible.
It's because I think I grew up, I studied history, and so I know how scary historians can be. And I worked at a library, and I once opened a history book because I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. And then I saw this line an author wrote, and a patron had circled it in pencil, and she wrote incorrect, and she wrote the correct date in. I'm like, ooh, terrifying.
That is frightening.
Yeah. But that's more like the adult historical fiction realm, so I'm not too sure I feel like maybe YA readers are a bit more forgiving because they care maybe more about the story than, being perfect. I don't know. I hope. But yeah, I think it's just that burden of having to represent a history properly when I didn't grow up in Korea, and I know I'm fluent in Korean, but not enough to cover all the scholarly resources written in Korean. So I'd spend hours just trying to translate a passage. And with Korean, they also add in Chinese characters, classical characters. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know my Korean enough to translate Chinese. So that was pretty tricky. It was emotionally very difficult, but also rewarding in the end, I guess. But yeah, it was just the research in general, and that kind of emotional stress was there. Yeah.
When you took your trip, because you took your trip after you wrote The Silence of Bones, right? Did you feel vindicated from the research that you did, or were there even little real world details that you were like, oh, I didn't even think about that or notice that, and it gave you that depth of understanding you may not have had?
Seeing the palace was very, because my story starts off kind of mentioning the palace, and I'm like, oh, so this is how it looks like. But a lot of the police bureau, it doesn't exist anymore. So I would have liked to have seen it, but instead I kind of see other government buildings and kind of imagine how it would have been similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Kristin, what broke you?
Several things.
That's the correct answer.
I changed my book a lot over time, but so there were several that along the way I got obsessed with, and then later those scenes got entirely cut anyway. So I discovered that cars didn't have trunks yet.
Oh, those stuff.
Wait, what?
Somebody in a trunk in 1930, and it turns out none of them had any trunks.
No.
That didn't work.
It's inconvenient.
I was going to put somebody in a basement. I was going to lock them in a basement. New Orleans, they don't have basements.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Water,
I'm on the opposite
problem.
Yeah, we don't have basements in Texas, but
yeah.
now like I've got friends like Samantha's in Denver, and I've got friends in Denver, and I'm like, all your houses have basements.
I have a basement.
Yeah, it's so
Basements are
weird.
great.
Yeah, like you can't go down because most of like our soil is like rocky or it's limestone or whatever, so you can't dig down into it.
And in New Orleans, everything's too wet.
Oh yeah, that's true because it'll just flood.
It's under the sea level.
Yeah. Well, I feel for me, the nuns being bald was a thing that I was prepared for. The thing I was not prepared for was freaking trees, because I got to like copy edits, and I had this one pivotal scene at the end of my book that takes place under a tree. And from the first draft, I'd set it as a weeping willow because that felt like the most like beautiful, dramatic, like, you know, parting the curtains with emotions kind of thing. And then I got to copy edits, and the copy editor didn't say anything, but because the copy editor asked so many other questions about other details, like historical details, I was like, do they have weeping willows in England? And so I had to go research freaking trees.
Oh no.
They didn't have weeping willows. They were like imported from France in the 1700s. And I mean,
Oh my god.
I'm in like already gone through like 3 rounds of edits. I was like, so to like go find an appropriate replacement tree that was not as dramatic, but
You cannot get more dramatic.
historically accurate, and I want points for that.
If it doesn't have weeping in the title, it can't be dramatic. You
That's
know,
what
like
I felt like.
it's-
It was
it's the only
symbolic.
weeping tree.
It was
Yeah.
symbolic to the scene, and I cut it. And like again, a thing that nobody but like maybe an arborist would know. But I would find that like one arborist who's like, ha ha. So I had to change
What's
it.
it in the book?
It was so disappointing. And I just want to remind everyone who is watching us or who might have joined late or anything like that, we do have a giveaway going on for each of our books. And there is a link in the comments that I shared, and I'll go ahead and share it here.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Good idea.
Just to be pushing. Yeah, show off your beautiful books. If you go to this Google form and fill it out, you will be entered for a chance to win one of our gorgeous books. I'll show mine too. Oh, look, I match. I'm green all over. So moving on. So we all know that a big part of writing historicals is setting the scene, giving the vibe, letting people really like sit and soak in the worlds that you're creating. So my particular favorite passages, I could give less of a crap about like buildings or structures or anything. Sorry, June. I know like your descriptions are really beautiful, but I'm like, for me, I'm like, it was a building. Let's move on. My personal favorite scenes that I feel like do the best job of setting tone for a historical is when you either talk about food or clothes. So I would love for each of you to just share one little snippet of your book that describes either food or clothes that helps us kind of get a vibe for the time that your book is set in. And we can start with Chloe. I feel like you must have a
Wait, I need to find one.
No, you're okay. I'll pass you. I feel like I want one about clothes from you because I feel like you probably have really good clothes passages. So who else who is ready? Sam, I know you had one. Do you want to share yours about fashion?
Sure. Okay. So you will go where I tell you. Her voice was low and breathless, almost a gasp. For now, that is to dinner. Wear the green taffeta. The robe à la Française? I asked, perplexed. I hadn't worn that dress since before the Estates General met. Its style was the hallmark of the Ancien Regime. Wide, panniered hips, structured bodice, and elaborate flounces. But it's out of fashion. So is our guest, said my mother.
Ooh.
That was fantastic.
Yes, so much. It said so much.
Yes. That's why Samantha and I are enemies, because I read her book and I was like, no one has a right to be this good.
You're probably going to get like 3 more enemies out of this panel, though. So
I know, because I've already started June's and it's so atmospheric, and I need to know. And I'm really particularly intrigued by the inspector too. I want to see how his character grows throughout. So June, do you have a favorite passage either about food or clothes?
I'll read about clothes. His military robe was of forest green silk, and a pleated skirt swathed his trousers. Silver tigers embroidered his sleeves. I could tell it was Inspector Han only by the sword he wore, in black scabbard encrusted with 7 gold dots for the 7-star spirit, an ancient deity of fortune. Does not end with a bang like Samantha's, but there it is.
That was beautiful.
That's
That was
great.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. Kristen, do you have a passage you want to share?
I guess.
Is it food or clothes?
It's clothes.
Okay,
I don't
perfect.
think anyone eats anything in my whole book.
They're all starving.
Yes. Actually, there's a one scene where they make gumbo together, but I don't know where it is. I had to find this at the last second. So
Okay. I'm
Here we
going to
go.
want that gumbo passage later, though. Just for my own personal time. when
I don't know
I'm-
how to make gumbo, so maybe just go get a recipe.
Fair enough.
I
Fair
don't
enough.
cook.
Fair enough.
Let's see. She swept inside the club, leading a conspicuously wealthy pack, all of the kids except her sweating in oversized raccoon fur coats. Even in dead winter, most nights in New Orleans produced no more than a clammy chill, but the girl was the only one with the sense, or the vanity, to leave the fur at home. She wore a slinky dress covered with an angular pattern of gold beads, and enough jewelry to fuel the fencing trade in the French Quarter for a month. A gold necklace with translucent green dragonfly wings spread across her collarbone, an emerald ring, and nickel-sized emerald earrings that sparked light under her helmet of silvery blonde curls.
Ooh, I love
Minty.
Nice.
Minty.
I want that outfit.
that. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Doing
I would wear
research on like 20s fashion is bit. They need to bring it back.
Yeah.
They need to bring it
I'm
back.
bringing it back right now.
I know. I feel we should just all lean into it.
Mhm.
All right, Chloe. Did you
I'm
have
ready. I
Did we
knew
give
it was
you
in
enough time?
chapter 1. Yeah, I knew it was
Okay.
in chapter 1. It was literally, it's right here. I was just like, I know it's here somewhere. Okay. Most girls in the burlesque club, dancer or patron alike, were dressed as Rosalind was, in the fashionable cheap house sweeping through Shanghai like wildfire, with the outrageous slit down the side revealing ankle to thigh, and the high collar acting like a chokehold. The design was a blend of Western flamboyance with Eastern roots, and in a city of divided worlds, the women were walking metaphors. But Juliet had been transformed through and through, the little beads of her pocketless flapper dress swishing with every movement. She stood out here, that much was certain. She was a bright, burning star, a symbolic figurehead for the vitality of the Scarlet Gang.
I'm so excited.
Love it.
I love that, a walking metaphor for the divided city
So
too.
vivid.
Chloe, are you also October? You're coming out in October?
November.
November. Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So Sam,
Long
when does
way.
your book come out?
October 13th.
Okay, and then Chloe, when does your book come out?
Oh, close.
November 17th.
Okay, and then June, yours came out in April, right? And then Kristen, yours came out in May.
Yes.
Okay, and then
May
mine
12th.
came out. Mine came out in June, so we just sort of spam the whole.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminds me, thank you for bringing that up. If you go to the description of this video, you will see that there are buy links for all of our books. So you can buy for June and Kristen and myself, and you can pre-order for Samantha and Chloe. And they're all from Bookshop, not the other bookseller, the other online bookseller we shall not name. But however, wherever you buy them, definitely pick up these books because those passages all sounded amazing. So confession time. I want to get into talking a little bit about writing. And I feel like I'm going to tell on myself when I give my own answer about this. How many manuscripts did you write before you wrote the one that your debut, the one that you sold as your debut book? And were any of them also historicals? So who am I going to pick? Kristen.
I wrote 1 3/4, I guess.
So
I wrote
this is
one.
like legit, like your first,
No,
almost first
before
book.
this. Before this.
Okay.
Like I queried one book that never went anywhere, and one I just wrote and never really finished, and so didn't do anything with it. It was very autobiographical. So
Okay.
it just never will see the light of day. And but this one was so basically my third-ish.
Okay. So were any of your other 1 3/4? I guess the autobiographical one probably wasn't. What was the other one that you completed and queried? Was it also a historical or was it
Yes,
contemporary?
it was.
Okay. Was it the same time period or a totally different one?
No, it was during the Civil War, which is
Oh,
a
okay.
very difficult time period to get right. And so now I'm kind of glad it didn't work out
Yeah.
because I'm sure I didn't get it right entirely. I mean, how can you?
Yeah, it's hard.
I feel like it's an ongoing conversation. Like clearly in today's climate with the protests and Black Lives Matter and police protests, we never left the Civil War behind. So
For
I think
sure.
talking about it like it's done history is short-sighted. But June, how many manuscripts did you write before you wrote the first draft of The Silence of Bones?
So I wrote 2 Regency romances.
Oh,
I want to read those.
I do too.
Yeah.
I love reading romance. I did not expect that answer out of you.
No,
June.
surprise
I'm
it.
very
Yeah.
intrigued
I
now.
began writing because of Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I wrote a third Regency romance. That was the one I queried. And then I had a few bites, but it didn't work out. And so I spent the next 8 years rewriting that book. So I think that third book can split into 2 books because I rewrote it and it was completely different from the original draft. So I'd say a total of 4 books before The Silence of Bones.
Okay.
Before moving to Korea.
Okay. Sam, what about you?
So I wrote the first 2 books of a big ass fantasy trilogy that was not historical. It was inspired by history, but they all are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2, but
You had 2. Okay.
yeah.
Y'all are making me feel really bad right now. Chloe, what about you?
I was about to say no. Don't worry. I wrote 8 before it, but
Thank
also
you.
because
Solidarity, Fred.
I was just an overachiever in high school, so I had nothing. I was just always writing. So I started writing when I was 13. So I didn't set out to pursue publication, which is why they all came out so fast because they were all first drafts. Before these Island Delights, I would never revise them because I wasn't setting out to publish them, right? So I had 2 paranormals during the time Twilight was really popular. Then I had a dystopian. You can literally see the trends moving as I was writing because I was following them as they were coming. And then I had a mystery trilogy, and then I wrote 2 high fantasies, and then what's these Island Delights?
Wow.
So how did you end up? Because I have a very similar. I wrote probably 9 full manuscripts. Some of which I went through multiple rewrites on before I sold Hood. So I'd probably written maybe 4 or 5 manuscripts before I wrote the first draft of Hood. But then from the first draft to selling Hood was an 8-year gap. So I ended up writing multiple things. But I'm the same way. I'm an overachiever and a perfectionist, and I don't open the door to readers until I've already done multiple drafts of my own revisions on it or rewrites. I tend to just rewrite. I'm it's a revision, and then I just rewrite it.
Yours were all in different genres too, right, Jenny?
Oh yeah, I did the same thing. There was trend hopping, and all of my historicals are all in different time periods. There's not a particular. I wrote one that's turn of the century. It's about pickpockets and turn of the century New York. I wrote one that was a future. I started a trilogy, but I only wrote the first one because I quit I write the first draft and then I'm just done with it.
No, because you're smart. Don't write your whole trilogy. Just not until you have to.
That's generally the advice I give you is don't write the next book of a series if you haven't sold it yet. But I wrote a lot of my next book is set in the 1925 in Chicago and Dublin. So I jumped around. But so Chloe, let me ask, because you're the most similar to me. What eventually made you land on this time period, this story?
Honestly, it might have just been because like, because you know how it's really, really rare for someone to end up publishing the very first manuscript that they wrote, right? So when I go back and actually read like my first manuscript, like craft wise, it like absolutely could not have been published like at all, because it was just, I didn't really know how to tell like a cohesive story yet. So I think like 8 manuscripts later, I had finally like, I'd been like skilled at each book. So like with the paranormal, I was picking up like how to build like characters that you want to focus on. With the mysteries, I was kind of learning how to like plot something and foreshadow. Like fantasy, the fantasy series, I was learning how to world build. And I think I was picking up so many like puzzle pieces along the way that by manuscript number 9, like I'd reached all those levels and I could actually produce the thing that I wanted to produce with the story particularly. I don't know if that, like, you think it's something similar?
Well, that's the thing with mine. Like, even though it was not that many individual books, I rewrote The Boy in the Red Dress so many times.
Yeah,
Started out a different book entirely. You know, it was going to be a kidnapping story, hence all the researching trunks and basements. It all got cut. So it is a whole different book than it used to be. And like you said, Chloe, over time, I feel like it was my education. Doing all of these different drafts, doing all your different genres, it taught me how to write books.
Like, now I kind of want to know for all of you, like June, because I just interrupted you. I kind of want to know what drew you to this particular time period that you're writing about versus like any other time in history that you could have written about.
So when I wrote romance, I just love the like 18th, 19th century. I don't know why, but anything as far away from the present, I guess there's that escapist element. And it doesn't feel as close to your skin. Like, you could write about current topics without feeling like you're actually writing about them. So for me, what drew me to the event in the Silence of Bones was just the fact that there was an event like the Catholic persecution that I never knew even existed. Because I've always been curious as to why like Korea is such a Christian dominated country when it comes from a very Buddhist and Confucian based history. And so reading about that was very fascinating, and I just ended up revolving the story around that period. But
Samantha, what about you? What drew you to the French Revolution? Because yours happens at the beginning, right?
So I mean, I just really liked the French Revolution, but this actually, my book, it's at the very beginning of the French Revolution. It's not like the terror and stuff. It's sort of like change has started and it's looming, like the stuff that we think of when we think of the French Revolution. So it's sort of happening in this moment of pause where you're like, well, what's gonna happen next? Like, I think I wasn't there, but it seems like a time in history where there was a lot of uncertainty about what this is going to mean. And so
we
don't
know anything about uncertainty for now.
Right. That feels relatable.
I think, and I like that idea of exploring the beginning of what became a significant event. Right. Even like Kristin and Chloe, for you guys in the 20s, the Roaring 20s, you're between world wars. You're at, I don't know the specific years at your start, but the 20s from 1920 to 1929 and the stock market crash in the U.S. there was a huge arc to it, of people kind of coming to, and even a lot of people don't realize that the fashion changed really significantly. So what we think of as flappers is actually the late 1920s. And the early 1920s was much more about that coming out of a war that they thought was going to end the world and then didn't, and then seeing that progression throughout. I think it's really fascinating to explore.
There's something almost like liminal about it, like you're on the threshold and in the 20s in particular, because we associate it with parties, it's a party in a portal or something.
And they just had a pandemic.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah. Oh, and I honestly, now living in a pandemic, I'm like, oh yeah, the Spanish flu was probably like, It did not affect my writing. At the time, my writing was so focused on World War II because I forgot that there was a pandemic that killed 50 million people around the world in like 1 year or 2 years. So I might have some more copy edits editing in my future. So speaking of writing processes and learning skills and stuff like that, what are each of your writing processes like? Do you consider yourself a plotter or a pantser? And counterpoint, can you actually be a pantser when you're writing historicals? My resounding answer is no, you cannot. There's so much research and structuring that has to go in. But I want to hear how all of you go about your writing process. So I'll ask Chloe, since you and I have similar manuscript backgrounds.
I definitely agree. I don't think you can pantser historical. And I would imagine there would be a lot of rewriting because, things have to like suit a specific, like, even if you're writing like, because mine is like historical fantasy technically. And I would even say it's like alternate history in a sense, because obviously there was no monster running around actual 1926 Shanghai, right? So even though that we know of, the government might be hiding it. You never know. But yeah, it's like, even though there are certain elements that you can just completely put in that are like fantasy in a sense, like the whole timeline that you're working with, like I couldn't imagine pantsing it, because then there's just so much to like have to shift around, because there were certain events, like I knew that my plot had to move from a certain day to another certain day because those were like the big historical events. So like there was the Shanghai massacre in April of 1927, and I knew I was working towards that event. So I couldn't imagine how I could pants that, because then I would have to like spread out the events throughout the months, because I had like 5 months to pass and all of that. So I'm definitely a very intensive outliner. And I think that's why my first drafts are kind of clean, because I basically write everything in my outline. Like I've heard the term like draft zero, and I think that kind of suits my process. Like I essentially write the book in the outline. It's just kind of messy and it doesn't read like a book, but everything that I need is there. So
Yeah.
intensive plotter.
Yeah, I am the same way. I used to be a pantser, and because I thought that plotting stole the magic, and now I realize that that was just my insecurity of not actually of worrying that I didn't know how to write. But Kristin, you talked about having to do multiple rewrites on The Boy in the Red Dress, and having lots of scenes that you researched that you eventually had to cut. So do you consider yourself more of a pantser?
No.
Okay.
I'm a plotter. I do the same thing as Chloe. My outlines might be 15,000 words long. Like I write like some scenes it'll just be a little paragraph, but others I'll get like dialogue crammed in there, and it'll be like a page or two long for that one scene, and that way when I get to writing that scene, it's practically done for me. I just get to have fun with it. And I mean, I still hate first drafts, but but yeah, I just had the wrong story, it turned out. That's what happened to me, is that I had the right characters, the right place, the right time, and the wrong story. And it took me several drafts to figure that out, because I knew if something was wrong, and I kept trying to make it happen, and it wouldn't happen. And then I had this like big nervous breakdown sort of, and and had an epiphany. And my friend gave me a tarot reading that was like, it's gonna be okay. And so I put it aside and picked it up, and suddenly was like, oh, it's a murder mystery. And
so your friend was right.
My friend was right.
Have you gone back and had more tarot readings since then?
I can't remember.
It feels like maybe you're due for one.
We did it at the Historical Novel Society conference, which I recommend. It's really fun.
That sounds amazing. So, June, do you consider yourself a plotter or a pantser?
I am in between. So I plot out the historical aspect, because like you guys have mentioned, you can't, because I feel like when you write a historical fiction, there are rules in place already. Like the world has already, happened. So I figure that out, and then the characters kind of pants around the events I've put in place. And as for, what can we pants historical fiction, my answer is yes and no. So no, you can't if you're writing like a book that circles around history. But I feel like you can if you write Regency romance and Victorian romance. Especially when you've written so many of them, like you kind of know all the, the tropes, like, you know how like balls work, that how like, mansions are organized and how the servants work and all that. So you know the rules already. And so you kind of, a lot of historical fiction, romances use history as more like a background, like a costume, rather than like something that actually influences the characters.
Yeah.
So that was my experience with historical romance. But then when I wrote historical fiction, I realized like pantsing is really impossible. This is like, you can't just like, say like, oh, she's going to be an emperor in like the 1800s, but it's like, no, an empress. But then it's like, oh, there were no empresses in Korea in the 1800s, things like that, right? So you need to know the history in order to like even develop your characters and the actions they're going to do and stuff like that. So yeah, and like it depends on what we're writing, I guess.
Yeah. What about you, Sam?
Yeah, so I agree with June. I think you can, if you decide you want an empress, then you just need to be writing fantasy. Yeah. And that's what so I sort of have a different process for every book that I've written. But for Golden Fury, I definitely did plot it. That was the first book I plotted, but it was just because if you have your plot happening in real history, you've got some serious benchmarks that you need to work around, like you all were saying. Yeah. So I plotted it, but then it turns out I did have to rewrite the last third of it because I got the first like 3 beats, but I thought that my last beat was the climax when actually it was like the midpoint. So whatever.
We've all been there.
It happens.
Yeah.
Just failed plotting, but I did plot.
Yeah. I think, June, you said it best, because I agree with this, that you can plot the history, but you can pants the characters and the choices they make and their emotions. Because honestly, to your point about Regency, because there's a joke in Regency romance about how many dukes there are. There are only I think 16 dukedoms, but like everybody's a freaking duke, and every book you ever read. Like nobody's ever a Marquess. There's like one Marquess in the history of Regency romance, and it's Sarah McLean, which is a fantastic book, and I highly recommend it. But yeah, I think that's ultimately, I have this theory, and I'll ask each one of you to answer too. I have this theory that writers have one thing that they're intrinsically good at, as far as, the tenets of storytelling. So if you have world, character, and plot, each writer is intrinsically good at one of those things. And that's the thing that you get right in your first draft. So for me, plot is my lodestone. That is my guiding light. And I almost never have to, I almost say never. At this point in my writing, just like 10 plus manuscripts on, I almost never have to rework the plot.
I hate you.
Easy.
That's great. We're happy for you, Jenny.
That sounds fantastic.
But it's because I do that really intensive planning process. I break my brain in outlining and plotting before I put anything on the page. But what I always have to draft in multiple revisions is characters, their emotions on the page in the scene, their backstories, their interactions with each other, how their choices drive that plot, like how to make the plot fit with their internal arc. And that for me is like so hard because it's soft. Plot is like, here's what physically happened. But characters are like, but how did everybody feel about it? So I'd love to know from all of you, what do you feel like your intrinsic thing is that you're driven, like that draws you in a story that you feel like you get right and then you have to go fix everything else in revisions?
That's a really good point.
That is a good question.
Yeah. I think mine is characters is my easy thing. Yeah. And if if I don't feel like I love / know the character, then I don't care about anything else. And so it's been a struggle moving on from this book where I knew that all of these characters, like I've written them so much that I know exactly what they would do.
Yeah.
So it's been hard to get into anything else in the same way because I don't know these guys. They're strangers.
Yeah.
Can I say like vibe? Is that
Yeah.
is that weird? Like yeah. It's like
I think that's
what.
I think that fits into kind of like.
But I mean, like emotional tone. Like it's not just the world. It's sort of like the
genre,
the aesthetic and I guess the tone. I guess so. I want to go back to vibe though. I'm gonna say vibe.
I accept that. I accept that.
Thank you.
I second that. I like vibe as a word.
Thank you. Thanks, Chloe.
Yeah. Because if I couldn't answer this because it's like I think I'm good at plot, but then I also rewrote my plot. And then I think I'm good at character, but then I also extensively revised that. So like at the end of it, I'm like vibe. That works.
Though I was sort of thinking the same thing because like I'm doing a revision now where I'm like completely rethinking both character and plot. So I'm like, what actually was good here? I think it was vibe. It was vibe. Yeah.
June, what about you? What do you feel like is your core strength as a writer?
I think for me, it's world, because when I begin drafting, I don't like any of my characters. Plot is not so great because I always rewrite it. But the one thing that always remains is like me going like, oh, this is a really interesting part of history. And I just like kind of like paste it into my document. Yeah. And then I kind of write the story around all these little historical tidbits that I want to introduce to readers. So that's the only thing that survives my revisions. So I'd probably say world.
Okay. I think world is, particularly for historicals, if that's your strong suit, you're in the right genre. Because so much of historicals is that world building.
So that's why I can't write outside of it. It's so hard. My contemporary is weird.
This leads nicely into my last question because we've got about 3 minutes left before we wrap up. What is next up for all of you? So some of you have announced book deals. Some of you might be working on stuff. Some of you might not be able to say. So June, you had a 2-book deal, right? When you sold The Silence of Bones. And so you had another book lined up, but you also just announced books beyond that, right?
Yeah.
So what do you have coming up?
So there's The Forest of Stolen Girls. That's the second part of the book deal. And it
has an amazing cover. Amazing cover.
I think so. But that's also why historical. And then my agent,
standalone?
Yeah, they're all standalone. I don't know how to write series.
Yeah. High five.
Yeah, and then and then they kind of mentioned that I was just playing around with an idea that my agent is like, oh, you need to pitch that to your editor. I'm like, oh, okay. And then she pitched it because I was already writing it, and then it worked out in the end. And that's also a why historical. So yeah, why historicals?
Yes.
Nice.
Staying strong.
Mm-hmm.
So Samantha, I know you have a follow-up if you want to talk about.
Yeah. I have announced my second book, Bright Ruin Things, set in the 20s, as you said. It is a YA retelling of The Tempest. And set during the Prosper Family Annual Bash. Sorry, I'm reading.
When they're reading the official announcement.
When their teenage ward May realizes this powerful family is not what they seem and seizes her chance to take the magic that's always been denied her. It's all set in one day.
Ooh, girl.
Ooh. That sounds intense. I did not know it was set in one day.
Yeah, well, except the epilogue, which is 1 year later.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. So, Chloe, what do you have up next after These Violent Delights?
I have the sequel because I end book one on a cliffhanger. It is. It's a duology. Okay. So book 2 will pick up right after book 1 ends, and everyone will have to wait a year to read that. But even though it's a cliffhanger, people will suffer. It's okay. We love suffering in this house.
Kristin, what do you have up? What are you working on? It's okay. You don't have to have an answer.
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of middle grade ideas now. I can't seem to make up my mind what I'm doing. So what I would really like to do also is write a sequel to The Boy in the Red Dress at some point. I'm not done with these characters. I want to write about them some more. And I've had several readers say, is there some more? I wish there was more. So maybe I'll get to one day.
That's fantastic. I think that's great. Well, we are out of time. So I want to thank all of you for dressing up, most of all, because I did not think anyone would go along with it. I specifically bought a hat. You can't see it, but I am wearing a corset. You don't need to see it. It's very tight. Tighter than I anticipated. But I bought it just so that I could be dressed up for this panel. But thank you to all of our historical debuts for being part of this chat today. And as I said, all of their books are available now either for purchase or pre-order. And you can get those links in the description down below. Yeah, show it off one more time. Show it off. You worked hard for that. And we will be doing a giveaway for one copy each of everyone who is on the chat today. And there is a form that I've shared throughout. So if you have not had a chance to fill out that form, or if you've showed up late and want to get in on that, you can go ahead and fill it out. So thank you to all of you for being available. Thank you to everyone who showed up and watched. This will be available after the fact so that people can come back and watch it and enjoy how charming and witty we all are. So thank you to everyone, and
thank you, Jenny.
Good rest of your Saturday.
Yes, thank you so much. Bye.